At this point, most of her teeth are gone, and her jaw just fell on the doctor's hands. She just started falling apart. Like, literally, she started falling apart. Hi guys, I wanted to do like a get ready with me while I tell you guys about this really interesting story, because, you know, why not learn about, you know, history as we're doing our makeup. Believe it or not, but it's actually really hard to do your makeup and film a video. I tried filming this video like 3 times already, and it's just so hard. I have a hard time multitasking, I guess you can say. I wanted to kind of like do my makeup and talk to you guys, but I feel like since it's not my usual makeup routine, that I kind of wasn't really focused, you know? Like, I felt like I wasn't doing my makeup right, or I wasn't really telling the story right. So I decided to just, you know, look like this. We are going to be learning about the Radium Girl. Have you guys heard about the Radium Girls, or is this completely new to you? Like, when I first heard this story, I was just so shocked that something like this actually even happened. So let's go back to the discovery of radium.
We now know that radium is a high-risk radioactive material that should be handled with care. But in the 1920s, it was the newest craze. When radium was discovered, it was seen as a powerful new element that would cure cancer. It was added to everyday items such as cosmetics, water, and even toothpaste. People were fascinated by the glow-in-the-dark effect this element radiated. Eventually, this new fascinating element would turn deadly for the factory women who were in direct contact with radium. These Radium Girls will soon be known as the living dead.
In 1892, Marie discovered the existence of the element radium in this thing called pitch matter. She saw like this very shiny, illuminating element or little particles, and that is when she realized this new element glows in the dark. But she hadn't been able to isolate this like glowy material that she called radium. On April 20th of 1902, she was able to successfully isolate the radioactive element. They were able to discover that radium, obviously under control of doctors, it was able to cure cancer. Once people got a hold that radium can cure cancer and maybe even extend your life, people were fascinated by it. They were using it in everything. They were using it in toothpaste, they were putting it in makeup, seen as it can help the ugly, and you wanted to like get rid of your ugly, then you would buy like some sort of like cream or something like that, and it would just give you like this like illuminating effect. Once it got to like the early 1920s, mostly scientists were aware of the dangers of radium, and so was Marie Curie, because from just constantly touching and working with radium, her hands ended up burning. She ended up getting radium poisoning. She ended up dying in 1934, so she had all those years of exposure. To this day, her notes have to be handled with care because of all the radium that's still in her notes, because she constantly worked with it. Remember how I told you guys that radium glows in the dark? During World War I, Sabin Bomboski invented undark paint.
This paint was used on watch dials during World War I to help soldiers see the time at night without revealing their location to the enemy. And as for the girls working at the radium companies, they were seen as patriotic women helping out the soldiers.
Obviously, after the war ended, the watches were still really popular. So about 4,000 young women in their early 20s were hired to work for these corporations. You needed somebody to be very precise and very detailed. And then back in the 1920s, working in the radium company was like an elite job. Imagine you're in your early 20s, you're working for the radium company, and you're getting paid really well, because back then, if you worked in any other company, they had really bad conditions. I mean, they had terrible conditions too, but you know, they weren't working in a harsh environment. Like, all they had to do was come into work. They can dress however they want, because all they would be doing is sitting down and painting watches. And then on top of that, it paid very well compared to the other jobs. You know, you had better working conditions and you got better pay. So a lot of these women were like, you know, inviting their sisters, inviting their friends to like join. And on top of that, you got paid based on how much little dials or whatever you completed throughout the day. So this is a little example that I found on the internet. I don't know exactly how exact this is, but according to history.net, women back then were paid about $5 compared to working at a radium company. You got paid $18. So that's a huge difference. What exactly was your job? So I'm going to give you guys a little example. So pretty much what you had to do is you had a very fine brush that you would use to dip it in the paint and then just draw the little numbers. So that's all they had to do. The more they completed, the more money they got paid. Now think about it. Like, think about it like a job that you have right now. You're working at Starbucks, you're working at customer service, any type of job, you're working at an office, working at the DMV. Compare that to just going, dipping in and painting. Like, if you really think about it, like, that's kind of relaxing. You go in there, you paint, and you complete, you know, obviously without all the like side effects and stuff like that. Other than that, like, it seems like a very nice job. Now, here is the problem. Radium could cure cancer under a controlled amount and under doctor supervision. What these girls were doing, they had radium in the little containers of paint and a brush, and management encouraged them to use their lips to provide a very fine point. And the reason they encouraged this is because it was a lot faster than wiping off, cleaning it off, or whatever. And remember, they went in there thinking that radium was good because, you know, they asked their employers, like, well, you know, is it bad that I ingest the paint? They're like, no, like, it's fine. Radium can cure cancer. It can extend your life. You should be honored that you're working so close to radium. You're just gonna end up with like the best health out there. And of course, a lot of the girls did use this lip method. One of the properties of radium is that you have this like illuminating effect. So imagine these women, they go into work and at night they come out glowing, their hair's glowing, their lips, and a lot of them actually they actually really like this like benefit of it. And a lot of these girls actually eventually ended up using the paint on their nails. So they would paint their nails, they would paint their face, they would use it as makeup, and then they would go out to like, you know, the clubs. Well, maybe not the clubs, but like they would go out with their friends at night, and they would even take their best clothes so they can get radium on it and they could be glowing. Because again, management told them it was fine. And, you know, us girls, we like shiny stuff. So after work, you know, it would be nighttime and all these girls would be wearing their nice clothes and they would be shimmering. So eventually the people called them the ghost girls. Not because, like, you know, anything bad about ghosts, but just because they were illuminating and they were shiny and they were bright. You could see them in the dark as they walked home. And that's why they were called the ghost girls. Okay, graphic warning coming up. So radium poisoning doesn't happen right away. A lot of these girls didn't see any side effects for years after they left their job working at the radium factory. One of the first reported victims is Maggie Malgia. And she would be one of the first to notice that she was having some health problems. She started with a toothache and she just had this like constant pain. So she went to her dentist and her dentist looked at her teeth and was like, okay, well, if it's really painful, we're gonna have to pull your teeth out. They ended up pulling her teeth out because she was just in so much pain. And when the doctor pulled the tooth out, there was a lot of pus and blood. Usually if they remove like a tooth that's decayed, eventually the pain goes away. But her pain persisted for a long time and it just got worse and worse. Her breath smelled really bad, like she was just in constant pain and all that going on. So she ended up going to see her doctor again because after the tooth removal, all the pain pretty much like started like it moved down to her body. Like she started having problems with her limbs. She was just in constant pain. Like her whole body just hurt. Like at this point it's not just a tooth, at this point it's her whole body. So she ends up going to the doctors again, and the doctors, they just don't know what's wrong with her. Like, we don't know what's causing you all this pain. So we're just gonna diagnose you with rheumatitis, which is pretty much inflammation and pain of your joints and muscles. At this point, most of her teeth are gone. There was this one incident where her dentist was just like grabbing her jaw, and her jaw just fell on the doctor's hands because her bones were literally like honeycomb, and that's why her jaw broke. She was just done for. There was nothing to really help her with. There's nothing doctors could do. They didn't even know where it could be coming from. She just started falling apart. Like literally she started falling apart. Eventually a lot more girls started complaining to their employers about health concerns. Some of them were like concerned, like, could it be the job? And a lot of employers are like, no, don't worry, it's not the job, it's not the radium, like, keep working. And of course, a lot of the girls, you know, they did go and, you know, talk to their doctors, and a lot of the doctors, they just didn't know. So, you know, they would say that, you know, you have syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease, and that's what's causing you this. Some of the doctors were paid off to pretty much lie to these girls, and they could have lied and said, like, you know, it's syphilis, you know, figure that out, like, you caused this on yourself, it's syphilis. And then eventually Maggie Malia did pass away. So Grace Freyer had been working for the New Jersey plant, and it wasn't until 5 years later when she finally started having symptoms, which was, again, you know, the tooth pains, the body aches. She started going to doctors.
Doctors suggested maybe her last job might have something to do with it. She reached out to US Radium, and they seemed very willing to investigate. They sent on a young doctor to examine her, and the doctor brought one of his colleagues. She was declared to be in fine health before she was sent away. However, he was not a doctor. Instead, he was a toxologist working for US Radium, and his colleague, he was none other than the company's vice president. Together, they attempted to organize a cover-up for the whole epidemic. In 1923, Grace Freyers and others filed a complaint with US Radium. US Radium claimed that the women were lying and wanted the company to pay for their medical expenses.
However, because she had not been working with Radium for the past 5 years, they did have a statute of limitation of 2 years, which meant that she could not at all sue them. They were trying to push that trial further and further back, and kind of just hoping that these girls would die. So then her story got so much attention that eventually the companies were like, okay, we don't want to deal with all this press, so we're just gonna settle. So eventually that is what ended up happening with these women. They ended up getting a settlement. The first agreement was, we'll pay you $10,000, which, you know, at the time was a lot of money, probably like $100,000. That's it. And they were like, no, because after medical bills, medical expenses, and paying their lawyer, like, we're gonna end up with nothing. So then they came up with a new agreement which gave them $10,000, plus the company would pay for their medical expenses and their lawyer expenses, which then eventually they agreed. They would also get $600 yearly. But they didn't live long after that, maybe like a year or 2 years. They eventually just died, so a lot of them didn't even get to see much of this payment. Grace Freyer eventually did die at the age of 34 in 1933, after 2 years of winning her case.
Their case encouraged more women to come forward. Years later, Catherine Donahue and others filed a class action suit against their company. She worked for the Illinois plant. During the trial, Donahue fainted, but she continued to push forward, even testifying on her deathbed. Unfortunately, many of the girls would pass away before receiving any payment. Donahue died on July 27, 1938, at the age of 35. These girls knew they were going to die from radium poisoning, but still fought to bring awareness not just for the public, but to other girls working in radium plants. They won against worker injustice, but lost their lives in the battle. To this day, the Radium Girls are still glowing where they are buried.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Go ahead and leave me a comment down below and a like if you liked it, or a dislike, you know, it's fine. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.